So this is the tale of a mysterious beast known as Duckfoot. There was this recurring factoid that the players kept picking up in Portland from early on about someone named Judy, who appeared in a lot of writings that they found from the Tremere. They kept investigating the Tremere because they're trying to figure out for quite a while who had killed the Tremere sheriff, the Tremere prince before they got there. And the Tremere sheriff had this diary that they found in his secret haven. To get to the secret haven, they had to trace these thin bloods who turned out to actually be thick bloods to a farm in the middle of the woods where there were a bunch of pumpkins that may or may not have been enchanted, and there was a hidden thing under the farm, a hidden laboratory under the ground, and there were these thin bloods trapped in there, and there was all these wards to blow them up when they walked in. And so because they couldn't go in themselves, they had to use a raccoon. They had Emil possess a raccoon, and they put Google glasses on the raccoon so that they could see what the raccoon was seeing. And so the raccoon shows up in there and is with glasses on doing sign language at this thin blood who is trapped in a cage, and she's like... So in there, eventually, once they had managed to get stuff out of there, they find the diary of the old sheriff, and it mentions someone named Judy, who was collecting bodies for him, for his experiments. And they ask a lot of questions about Judy, and they get a couple of different conflicting answers. Some people say that, yeah, Judy was a ghoul that used to work for the sheriff. And then other people, specifically this Nosferatu Benny, who they talk to a lot, he's an information broker, tells them, yeah, Judy was a Nosferatu. But she's dead. She was killed a couple of years ago, he thinks. They are trying for a while to investigate this, but they're just kind of running into dead ends until something completely unrelated happens, which is they get word about a werewolf killer.
Running in the streets, doing things.
Oh no, not things.
There are news reports about a werewolf murderer who is roaming around in the park. I can't remember which one. Portland has 7,000 parks. One of them is really big and has a mountain and a river in it. It's a giant fucking park. And people go camping there. And a couple of campers have been brutally murdered over the last few months in this park. And one of them escapes and tells the reporters that she was chased by a werewolf. She describes a guy with a wolf head and giant claws chasing after her, attacked her friend in the park and tore him apart. And so this is on the news, and the other vampires are like, oh shit, is there actually a werewolf running around? And the players are like, oh shit, is there actually a werewolf running around? This is, I think, right after they had almost been murdered by shadow lords at the glass house. So they're a little touchy. And since from the moment that they arrived, from the moment that we even mentioned Portland, they've been nervous about werewolves. One of the first things they were told when they were leaving was back in LA, Bertram was like, yeah, don't stop at this city, don't stop at this city, don't go near Sherwood, drive straight through, because these are werewolf towns, these are werewolf territory. Just it's basically, as soon as you cross over into Oregon, just don't really stop until you get to the city and then stay there. And as soon as they showed up in Portland, people have been telling them, don't go here, don't go there, don't go to this place, don't go past that road, don't go past that river, don't go out in the woods at all. So then they're told, hey, you should go investigate that werewolf murder. If there's an actual werewolf doing this, we need to know about it, because that's a masquerade breach, that's a problem. So under protest, the players go and look into this. They go talk to this girl. They sneak into the hospital, interrogate her, and from what they can tell, she definitely does sound like she thinks she saw a werewolf, and so they're really nervous about this. And again, under protest, they head out to go looking for this werewolf, and they are searching around the park. They're talking to various animals, and they're talking to some chipmunks, and the chipmunks tell them, oh yeah. Sorry, that's not a very good chipmunk voice, is it? Oh yeah. That's better. Yeah, there's definitely a werewolf out here in a lumberjack outfit killing all kinds of people. And fuck. Even the chipmunks have seen it. This is so bad. While they're out here, they see something very mysterious. They see footprints. They find footprints that do not look human. But they also do not look like werewolf footprints. They look like the footprints of a giant duck. And while they are looking around and they find these footprints, and they're kind of puzzled by this, they're like, huh. Could a werewolf leave tracks like that? I can't think of any animal that would leave tracks like that. It looks ridiculous. They then meet another vampire out here, Perfect Tommy. Now, Perfect Tommy is the first vampire they meet from the northern Camarilla, the Camarilla across the river, who they've been told about a number of times, but who they have not encountered yet. And Perfect Tommy is the sheriff across the river. He walks out with awe on, and they're all like, "Ooh, he's so handsome." And he tells them who he is. Somebody rolled lore and rolled like, or politics and rolled like super high, and I was like, "You've heard of him? He's an enforcer for Mithras." So this goes back to the lore from the previous game I ran, where they had a huge war in New York, and Mithras was put in charge of New York City. So at this time, in this chronology, different from the regular game, Mithras is actually running New York City. Jesus fucking Christ. The cat just touched me. Mithras is running New York City. And this guy is one of Mithras's enforcers from New York. They're not sure what he's doing out here, but apparently he is here in Portland, and he is currently the sheriff of, what is it called? Vancouver, Washington. And he talks with them, and he tells them that he was sent over here to look for this werewolf murderer. And they're like, "Really? What do you guys know?" And he's like, "I don't know anything. I killed a werewolf years ago, so every time there's a problem with werewolves, I have to. They make me go look." And they're like, "That's the same with us, and we haven't even killed a werewolf. Every time there's a werewolf problem, it's us." He's like, "It sucks, right?" They're like, "Yes, it sucks. Jesus." So they talk with this guy for a while, but he also has not seen this werewolf. He's looked around, and he's like, he's a Bruja. He can't talk to animals. He doesn't know what the chipmunks have seen. He's not any good at finding tracks. He couldn't even find the Duckfoot. And they kind of swap stories and are trying to figure out what's going on, but they basically have no information. And at this point, they have two different things that they're looking into: Judy and the werewolf. And they're both kind of dead ending. And they had talked to Benny, but Benny had mentioned to them that back when Judy was alive, she used to work out of this warehouse by the docks. They go there and it's all locked up and they can't really get inside. So they ask some rats. They talk to the mice and they're like, "Well, tell us your wisdom, rats. What's going on in that warehouse?" And the rats are like, "Oh yeah, it's full of dead bodies." They're like, "Oh God." Like dead rat bodies? No, people bodies. Oh, fuck, God, why everywhere? So they decide they have to go to this warehouse. Now, in this warehouse, what they find is some pretty messed up stuff. There are a lot of bodies in here. Like, a lot of bodies. Like, probably close to 100 dead bodies in here. And it looks like they've been stacked up in here over time for a long while. Years, most likely, because some of them are super decayed, and they've been piled and piled until like a lot of these corpses have just burned down, or not burned, but like decayed down to like a thick layer of crud.
Oh God, that is gross. Just no, please stand behind there. I'm.
What is this?
They have like a room that's just piled up with dead bodies, absolutely swarming with flies and maggots and roaches, rats everywhere. And they also have like another area that looks like a murder room, that there's bloodstains all over the place. They've got a whole bunch of like knives lying around that they're all like dirty and gross. And they're just like looking at this and they're like, "Oh my God, what have we wandered into?" And they talk with the rats, because there are lots of rats. And they ask them, like, "What, pray tell, the fuck?" And the rats tell them that there's a woman who shows up here all the time. She shows up and she brings people here. And then there is a kid, they describe a child who also shows up here, and they say that the child can like disappear and then reappear, and the player's like, oh god. And the child like cuts up these bodies and eats them. And the player's like, oh no. They start examining these bodies. They start dragging them out of the pit, mostly the fresher ones, and looking through them. And what they discover looking at this is that they don't find really any like adult men in here. It's a lot of women, a lot of elderly people, and a couple of children. But like looking through them, they're like, yeah, it is definitely notable that everyone in here seems like there's someone who is physically very small or would be like probably really elderly and weak, at least of all the bodies that we can sort of still identify. There are a lot more that are kind of too decayed to really tell, but we're just guessing that those are probably the same way. They decide that they'll have to stake this place out, and they stake it out for, I think, a couple of nights, waiting to see if this woman shows up. And eventually, indeed, she does. A woman shows up in like a little minivan, and she shows up. She has a key to unlock the thing and drives into this warehouse. A couple of them were hiding in the warehouse. They like cloaked, because Stas is a Nosferatu. He like obfuscates and goes inside. And what happens is, this woman, who's like a sort of normal looking, looks like a regular middle class lady in a minivan, she drives up, she opens the minivan, and she pulls out another woman who she has like kidnapped, who's like tied up with duct tape, and drags her over here. And then the woman who brought her like goes over and just like sits on her phone, like obsessed, like focused on her phone, while this child-sized Nosferatu decloaks and then very viciously murders this victim, kills her with these jagged knives, cuts her open, eats some of her organs, and then like whoosh, vanishes again. And then the woman who brought her here drags the remains of this corpse over into the pile, herps it on the pile, and then takes out like a big bag of salt and like throws salt all over it. So the player's like, Jesus Christ. Okay. Not sure how to react to this. So they try two different things. One is they try to send messages to this girl with the rats. They try telling the rats, like, we want you to deliver a secret message to Judy. And the rats are like, I don't know who Judy is. Okay, the creepy murderer person. And they never get any responses from this. They also then capture the woman. They capture her. And they interrogate her. And they find out that her name is Pat. So the deal with this woman, as they're talking to her, she is kind of deranged and seems like she might be mind controlled, and is sort of freaking out as they talk to her. They also are like searching through her internet history and looking up her social media. She's a real estate agent, and what they're able to get out of her is that from talking to her, she seems to be under the impression that this girl, Judy, is her daughter, who has some sort of illness that requires her to eat people. And so, like any good mother would, she has taken to kidnapping and murdering many, many dozens of people over the course of several years, dragging them to an abandoned warehouse, watching them get murdered, and then dumping their bodies in a pile and covering them with salt to try and keep the smell down. Obviously, looking at through her social media history, they see that she does have a daughter, or did have a daughter, but years ago, and apparently her daughter died, like in a car accident. So they're like, well, maybe it's her daughter's a vampire, or maybe she thinks it's her daughter. They don't really know. They're not clear. The woman seems to be a ghoul, but does not seem to be aware that she is a ghoul. And they're interrogating her, and then they're like, okay, mind wipe, like dominate, like mind wipe. We weren't here. No one asked you about this. And when they like let her go, and they're like, we got to follow her and find out where she goes, they go back to their car, and they find that something has crushed their car. Like, what the fuck happened to the car? And they climb up on top, and they see on the top of their car are these giant footprints that look like a duck. Their reaction to this is to like kind of walk around on the street. They're out like on this rural street kind of in the woods, and they're like, hello? Are there any ducks?
Is there anybody hiding there in the dark?
And then they like lure a raccoon, I think it is, and they give the raccoon like a piece of cheese, and they're like, go out there and tell whoever is out there in the dark to come talk to us. But no one comes to talk to them. So they track this woman back to the house where she lives, and they're like, we don't really want to fight Judy if we can avoid it at all. And we definitely don't want to fight her at her place. Let's see if we can follow this woman around and learn anything else. So they're like tracking the woman, and at the same time they go, you know what? We need to figure out what's going on with Duckfoot. And they take to the internet.
Take a spin, now you're in with a techno set. You're going surfing on the internet.
They're like, well, maybe this is some known thing. Like, maybe people around here would be familiar with the Duckfoot. Maybe someone else has seen this. So they start searching. They start searching for Duckfoot online. And they find a guy who's running like an old GeoCities website. So the guy's name is Cliff. He lives in Cascade Locks. And he is the world's leading authority on Oregon's most esoteric cryptid, the Duckfoot of Columbia River. So they call Cliff to talk to him about Duckfoot. And he invites them out to discuss their sightings. And the guy's like, first of all, if you want to come looking to hear about Duckfoot, you gotta bring your own beer. I know lots of things about Duckfoot, about his 7 laboratories. 7 is a sacred number, his 7 places to hide, with the 7 secret entrances. I saw his footprints on the beach 3 years ago. One time my brother saw Duckfoot, live and in the flesh. 2 months later, he got the cancer. I had a dog once who used to hunt Duckfoot with me, and he went running off into the woods. He never came back. Duckfoot has a massive range. Regular ducks can fly many miles. So since Duckfoot is 10 times the size of a regular duck, he can fly the whole width of the earth and the length of the planet, just in a single afternoon. You gotta be real careful when you go hunting for Duckfoot. It'll take you to strange places. I've got parking tickets from all over Oregon and Washington, but those are just the cost of my obsession. So they meet Cliff, and they bring him some beer, and he talks to them at great length about Duckfoot and all his many theories about him. And eventually he takes them on his little boat out into the river to an island where Duckfoot resides, according to him. But he tells them that they have to be careful because he's been warned by park rangers several times that he's not supposed to come back to that island again. So they get out there, and Cliff, who by this point is pretty drunk, is wandering around the beach looking for Duckfoot. And Co and Paul are looking, trying to find this guy, trying to find, like, well, is there a giant duck out here? I don't know. I mean, I guess let's look. And Co is auspexing, right, because he's got the auspexes. And eventually, walking around, he finds Duckfoot. And it's a Nosferatu. It's this very large Nosferatu with giant duck-shaped feet who is standing in a tree, just kind of hanging out watching them. And they're like, oh, I guess that makes sense. At least it's not a werewolf. And they go up to talk to him. And they're like, what's up, dude? How's it going? He is also looking into the werewolf, which is why they've been running into him. However, when they talk with him, they learn that he also has not been able to track down this werewolf. And like, he has talked to animals, and he's definitely suspicious that there is a werewolf going around killing people, but he hasn't seen it. And he says that as far as he knows from like people he talks to who know these things, none of the local werewolf packs are familiar with this either, and they apparently are also looking around trying to figure out who this is. So he says either it's not really a werewolf or it's a rogue werewolf, and the other werewolves are also trying to find it. He also drops a lot of hints that he is a member of the Sabbat. But because he's talking to Co and Paul, who were both played by characters who don't pay a lot of attention or ask a lot of follow-up questions, they completely miss this. And they're just like, why don't you come with us on our adventure? Like, come back to the house. They tell him where they live. Like, you should come check it out. He's like, no, thanks. But you guys should come see me. Like, you come down to my church. And they're like, oh, you got a church? Where's that? It's like, he gives them an address. Like, what's it called? The Church of Blood. Cool. Okay. We definitely might swing by then. And so they go and find Cliff. Like, yeah, we didn't find Duckfoot, dude. Let's get back on the boat. And they head back. We got nothing from that. That was extremely funny, but otherwise a waste of our time. But while they're doing that, the other group, the other party members, did manage to successfully track down Pat and find the house that she lives in. And in monitoring that house, they have spotted Judy, the little kid, hanging out in there. And so they're like, we know where she is. We should go and do something, because we really shouldn't just allow this to continue. If nothing else, this is a Masquerade violation waiting to happen, right? I mean, yes, it's also an affront to all of humanity, but in addition to that, this is, at the very least, something that we should get rid of before it becomes a bigger problem than it is. They show up with the intention of trying to talk to her, but it doesn't work. The thing about vampires is that vampires have, like, the beast within them, right? Vampires have the beast within them, and the beast always wants you to do the bad things. One of the reasons why it is very frowned upon to turn children into vampires is that when you turn children into vampires, they very, very frequently and very quickly fall into, total madness. Because in order to resist the demon inside, like the monster that wants to control you, you have to have a lot of self-control and what is another word for self-control? Self-control, and also a synonym for self-control. And I don't know if you've ever met any children, but most of them don't have a lot of any of the synonyms for self-control. Judy has pretty much just plummeted down the humanity track and is very, very close to the point of being a completely mindless monster at this point. She has bloodbound this ghoul when she was a little bit more clever, and she is still just like conscious of herself enough to kind of keep manipulating the ghoul slightly, but mostly at this point she's just operating on instinct. I think that they get spotted trying to sneak into the house and get into a fight with Judy and also with her ghoul, but more importantly a fight with her other ghoul who they had not realized was in there, which is a chimpanzee. So Judy, when she was a child, liked animals, and so when she got turned into a vampire, she went and ghouled a chimpanzee from the Portland Zoo. Chimpanzees are terrifying. Like, a regular chimpanzee is basically strong enough to just tear any normal human being into pieces almost effortlessly. They are super crazy strong, and they, are also totally psychotic. A chimpanzee is like a person with super strength and no sense of ethics, morality, or consequence. I cannot think of anything more terrifying than that. This one is ghouled, so it's even more violent and more powerful than usual. And when the players go in there, they chase Judy up into this big attic space. That's like, if you've ever seen the Planet of the Apes movie with, what's his name, Gollum? For some reason, all I can think of is Peter Billingsley, but that's not... Peter Billingsley would have been an interesting casting choice. Andy Serkis. I don't know why I thought Peter Billingsley and Andy Serkis' names were similar. But yeah, it's not Peter Billingsley. Funny though that might have been. It's Andy Serkis. It's like the monkey man, Planet of the Apes, where he has like the big like climbing thing up at the top of the house. Never mind, I'll just show a clip of it. Whatever. They go up into that place, and there's a chimpanzee flying around. They're like, what the fuck? Why is there a chimpanzee? Like, we're in a suburb. What the hell is this? And the chimpanzee just like tomahawks down and starts wailing on them with fucking potence. It was super brutal 2 or 3 of the players got torpored in that fight. The chimpanzee was just wrecking their shit. Its stats were really high, and it's just unleashing on them. And it doesn't have like a lot of health, but it's a chimpanzee, so it's kind of small and really fast, so it was hard to hit. And they were just really struggling in this fight. They finally managed, after getting their asses walloped by this monkey. I know it's not really a monkey. They finally managed to kill this chimpanzee. And they're like, oh my God. I don't remember what happened next. They killed Judy. They killed her mom. Because it was the player characters, I'm going to assume they probably burned the house down. Maybe. Then they're like, well, we had to go clean up those bodies. So they purchase a murder truck. What is a murder truck? It's self-explanatory. Murder truck, just picture in your head what you think that means. That's what it is. They get a murder truck. They take it there. They get a bunch of shovels and a bunch of cleaning supplies, some scrubbing bubbles, because they're going to need them. And they'd start cleaning out this mess, cleaning up the layers of crud, except for Ko, who just stands in the background, refusing to take part, shoveling up body parts and gore and hardened detritus of bodies, and filling this murder truck and scrubbing this place down as best as they can, pouring gallons and gallons of bleach on the thing, just trying to purge away the evidence as best as they possibly can manage. And then they drive this murder truck out into the middle of the boondocks, into werewolf country, dig a giant hole, and just bury all of it down there. Then, they have to try and get the smell out of the truck. It's like at the end of Goodfellas where they have the body in the trunk and he's like trying to clean it and it smells awful. It's like that, but of course multiplied exponentially. The other thing they find is they find a ring. Judy is wearing this ring, and it's like very noticeable because they're like, that doesn't look like a ring a little kid would wear. They pull it off and they look at it with Auspex and it's magic. And I'm like, huh. Why does she have a magic ring? What is she? A Bilbo, perhaps? So Stas, being the explorer that he is, he puts the ring on, and immediately his mind is like grabbed by some external force, and I have him make a series of checks to resist mind control. And he hears a voice screaming at him, and what he hears the voice say is, "No, I do not want any fucking Merlot."
If they want to drink Merlot, we're drinking Merlot.
No, if anybody orders Merlot, I'm leaving. I am not drinking any fucking Merlot!
This was a hint to warn them, but none of them picked up on this hint. The hint is, that is a famous line said by Paul Giamatti in a movie. Not a good movie. I actually fucking hate that movie, but it's a famous movie that he's famous for being in. So if you guys run into Paul Giamatti later playing an NPC, that's the hint. But none of them picked up on this, so it went nowhere. It was admittedly not a very good clue. It was just something I threw out there as like I don't know, what is the word for a clue that leads nowhere? Easter egg. Luckily, Stas managed to roll well enough to resist domination, and then, smartly, like say an elf would do, he just took the ring off, was like, okay, nobody put this on. I heard the voice of the Dark Lord Sauron when I wore this. Let's bury it someplace. Now that they had figured out who Judy was, and they had figured out the mystery of Duckfoot, the only thing left was the werewolf. But they did finally figure out what was going on with the werewolf by just going out into the woods, into the area where the werewolf killer had been killing people, and setting up a camping tent to lure the werewolf. Right? Because it's like, if you were like, how do I catch Jason Voorhees? Well, first go to Crystal Lake, and that's what they do. They go down to the park where he's been sighted. They set up a campsite, and they just kind of like wander around like, oh, God, I love camping. Oh, roasted marshmallows. Man, I sure hope there are no werewolves around coming to get me when I'm out here camping. And eventually, the werewolf shows up.
Werewolf?
No, I'm a squirrel monkey. Of course I'm a werewolf.
To murder them. And they are perplexed and I think in a way disappointed when the werewolf is just a guy in like a flannel shirt and jeans wearing like a Spirit Halloween werewolf mask who has like Freddy Krueger gloves that he's built for himself, and he's going around like, I'm a werewolf, rawr, and they're like, are you like real? What the fuck? And he's like trying to like grab them, like, let me catch you with my death bag. He like comes at him with his claws, and there's like, wow. I guess thank God it's not a real werewolf. So they kill him. I'm pretty sure Gideon just like punched him once and killed him because he's just a regular guy. What we need to do for the sake of the Masquerade is make it very clear that this guy was just a regular human dressed up as a werewolf, right? And this actually became, of everything that we've discussed so far, this became the most complex thing that they tried to do. They spent a long time figuring out a plan that involved calling the police, calling an ambulance, calling reporters, faking someone's death. I think at one point they were planning to go capture people and murder them at this tent. They were going to write a confession, write a journal. They were going to track this guy's house down. They were going to like spoof social media posts about werewolves. They were going to burn the forest down at one point. But eventually they just decided, you know what, this is fucking stupid. Let's just call the cops, tell them where this is, and leave. I think even the police would at least be competent enough to figure out what's going on here. They show up to a campsite. There's a guy in a werewolf outfit with the murder weapons on his hands. We just have to trust that the cops can handle this. We don't need to overcomplicate the situation.
Keep it simple, stupid. Great advice. Hurts my feelings every time.
So that was the mystery of Judy and the werewolf killer and Duckfoot. I hope that was fun. See you in space.
It's like the old gentleman in the store said to me, boy, there ain't no monsters around here. And you know something? They were right.